Welcome to Command Control Power, Apple Tech Support and Business Talk, the longest-running Apple consulting podcast. For over a decade, we've released weekly episodes featuring real-world stories from the front lines of tech support, in-depth discussions about managing clients and businesses, and conversations with fellow consultants and industry partners. What you're about to hear is a best-of episode originally broadcast on March 5th, 2019, a classic installment from our archives. To hear our latest, regularly recorded episodes, you'll need to subscribe to our Patreon-exclusive podcast feed. Designed specifically for Apple IT professionals, this private feed dives deeper into the challenges of running your consultancy, supporting your clients, managing staff, and maintaining large device fleets. For a modest monthly contribution, you'll gain access to a rich library of bonus content, exclusive interviews, and insights you won't find anywhere else. To subscribe, simply visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support. And now, on to the show.
So I have a couple of clients that use Mac Practice. And recently, with one of them, we were getting an issue where every so often on the LAN, if one of the workstations tries to log into the Mac Practice database, they get some sort of an SSL error. So we reached out to Mac Practice, and one of their techs said, you've got to restart the server every 14 days minimum and log into the database. That'll resolve the issue. And you just got to do that all the time. So I'm thinking that doesn't sound that great. So in reaching out to Mac Practice, I had a conversation with one of their techs, and I said, are you guys still recommending Dolly Drive? Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, this has come up before in our show, and Dolly Drive came out about 4 or 5 years ago, and they were advertising that they could do some sort of a cloud backup for Time Machine. So they're like, Dolly Drive. So I went to the Mac Practice webpage where they're actually recommending Dolly Drive as an alliance partner. And if you scroll down to go to the link where it says more information and pricing for Dolly Drive, it's an unresolvable page. So I went to the Dolly Drive website.
Great start.
I went to the Dolly Drive website. I mean, just because I needed to scratch this itch again, because I find this kind of odd. That Mac Practice is certainly a company that's viable. They've got a number of people that pay for their product. They've got all kinds of tech support. They're recommending something that just seems completely off the rails. Before I continue with the story, have you guys, in any of your IT work, bumped into anybody who was even using this product?
Yes, Mac Practice. That's it. That is
right.
That is the one-stop shop for Dolly Drive.
Yeah, but have you reached out to a client and the client was using the app and it was working or something, or it was just all theory?
Never.
Okay.
Yeah, no. It was specifically because of Mac Practice. We were looking for, something that was a recommended way to back it up, just like you said. And that's what they recommended. I remember having the same theory on it and asking Mac Practice, really? I usually go after industry standard, tools, and this seems to be not great.
Right. And they get very defensive. This is something we recommend. Sorry that I asked. We're not talking about anything that needs to be HIPAA compliant here or anything like that. I go to the Dolly Drive website, and it's dated 2016. Okay.
Right.
But remember last time we talked about this on the show, they had a blog, and I think the blog was talking about things to do when you upgrade to Mavericks or something along those lines. So the blog's gone. The blog won't load in anymore. I figured, let me give Dolly Drive a call. So I call. You just get answering machines. And then I look a little deeper on the web. I do a little bit more Google foo. And it appears that the owner of Dolly Drive, it's actually the CEO and founder. Dolly Drive says that they're a division of Cirrus Thinking LLC. If you do a Google on that, you get some LinkedIn references and some references to a web page for Cirrus Thinking, which dump you back into Dolly Drive. But there's no pictures, there's no real identity behind this company except for this CEO. Being a responsible technician, consultant, consider using this product if you did any due diligence. It's just weird.
It's sad. It's almost sad. I just sent you a screenshot right off the top part of their website. If you hover over what is Dolly Drive, it says your cloud backup, a cloud archive, and then it says Miros across devices.
Oh man,
two misspellings in one menu item. So
it's hard to do.
I mean, I don't even think they proofread the site. Like you said, it still says copyright 2016, Cirrus Thinking. I mean, that was a big year for the cloud, and I guess they named it after something cloud related. The last time I went ahead with this, I did it sort of regretfully, begrudgingly, and I completely disavowed any kind of ownership of this setup for the client. And I just said, I'm completely deferring to Mac practice. They say this is what they recommend. I don't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it. But I'm basically just deferring to them. And that's what I told my client. And during the setup process, there were some really weird steps in like the configuration of Dolly Drive. It was really, really non-standard. It certainly doesn't give you the warm and fuzzies, as Sam says, looking at it. And if you go through the actual process of setting it up, it's almost like, hold your nose and close your eyes and click and just hope that you never have to hear from them again. But that does not bode well for a cloud backup.
Yeah, I mean, forget about data restoration, just the security of the data. I mean, it's encrypted because it's a Mac Practice database, MySQL for the most part. Supposedly with the new version of Mac Practice 10, they've moved away from MySQL. What a shock that is. So strange. And I understand there's web startups all the time that fail and stuff like that. It's just the fact that they're connected to this very viable product that deals with the healthcare industry. That's one of the most sensitive types of companies that you would want to be so careful with when storing that data, because it is a healthcare provider.
Maybe they signed them up to like a 10-year contract and they can't get out of it or some weird stuff like that.
If anybody has any more information on Dolly Drive, and I'd love to hear it.
While we're on the cloud discussion, I noticed something interesting, or I tried to do something interesting the other day, because as I recently mentioned on a show, I started finally syncing desktop and documents to iCloud. And I've actually already seen a big improvement in my efficiency and stuff, because lately I take my iPad Pro upstairs if I want to like head in early or something like that and work on some documents, and I have everything available to me without having to put it in Dropbox or something along those lines. So it's been really beneficial to have my data synced, but I had a couple of folders there that just had like large files, things that didn't need to be backed up in the cloud and take up storage. So I decided to figure out a way without moving them out of the documents folder, how to make them not sync. And I'm not sure if you guys are already familiar with this, because this is relatively new to me in terms of using it. I didn't know if there was a method. So I did a little reading online and Apple discussions and found some good information on just adding a suffix to the folder, or whatever you wanted to exclude. And if you add the suffix .nosync, it will stop that particular subfolder from being in iCloud and will keep it local on your computer. So I tested it. I ran it on a folder that I had. I did a .nosync. It actually put the cloud icon with a slash through it on my computer. And in iCloud, I was signed into the web. I refreshed and the folder disappeared. So that was a pretty good tip that I didn't know about, that hopefully helps some other people that want to deselect certain items from syncing.
That is a great tip. I just had no idea. And this is something that Apple supports.
I wouldn't go that far. But there's no method in, at least that I could see. Maybe I looked in iCloud system preferences. There's no method of deselecting certain subdirectories. If you choose desktop and documents, that's what gets synced. And I didn't want to have to move something out just to not have it sync. And this seems to be an acceptable method that does, in fact, work.
Now, Joe, you had mentioned to me the other day through a text exchange that we had that there's another way to clean up your hard drive of unwanted files by not using a suffix but a prefix of beginning the file name with a dot, right?
Right, exactly, yeah. Put a dot at the beginning and you can reclaim a lot of disk space that way.
Watch your files disappear.
Right, one by one. Yeah. Jerry, I have a feeling you're going to, by the time this show goes live, you may have a folder called holyofholies.nosync. Is that a safe prediction?
Could be. Could very well be. Yeah.
Just as a disclaimer, do not follow Joe's advice.
Right. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, it's funny how file names still come into play, or maybe even more so these days come into play, because there was kind of this like period of time on the Mac where Apple was really proud, I think, of the fact that the file name extensions were just not necessary. Like, what a vestige of old computers. We've got a better way. You don't need to put the information in the file name. We store it in the resource fork or whatever. And then that was great and everything. But then, of course, once I think the internet took hold a ways back, and files used to be, were shared between Macs and PCs, it became even more important to use file names just proactively as a Mac user, to have them live happily on a file server that might have been shared by PCs and things. This comes into play occasionally with this one client I have where they still use iPhoto in a certain way in their process with photo libraries from their photography practice. There are occasions where a photo library will not have an extension on it. And I guess that's because they didn't have to at a certain point in time, like maybe an iPhoto 4 era or something. But then after a certain point in time, either they had to have the extension or it was just preferred that they do. And of course, any iPhoto library should be .iPhoto library. But some don't have that extension. And this comes into play where, let's say you're doing a carbon copy clone or clone of something containing iPhoto libraries. If they don't have a file name extension, then Carbon Copy Cloner just treats them as a folder, copies them as if they were a folder of various components, which is not what you want. You want the whole thing to be copied once and for all. And likewise, if you have to repair an iPhoto library, then, if you don't have the correct file name extension, that can cause issues. So it's weird that, sometimes this stuff does come up, but it's pretty important to kind of have a good understanding of, not only that dot prefix and other, I don't know if there are other prefixes that are relevant, but certainly file name extensions can be pretty powerful and important today.
Yeah, agreed. And actually, you talking about and us joking about the period before the file name, this came on the heels of a panicked call I got from a time and materials client, an attorney who likes to take control of his technology and only calls us when things don't seem that right.
Or when he gets above his head.
Yeah, so he called, and he's using a Mac Mini to do file sharing, and he's been running that for several years. And he was very, very concerned because he called us and said that he thought that his network was compromised, that files were disappearing. So I paid a visit to his office, routinely just checked the Mac Mini drives to make sure that they weren't failing. I was thinking, well, maybe disappearing files could be through just running a smart utility just to check the health of the drives. Drives were fine. I went into his folders. There were files beginning with hashtags. There were some that were // hyphens, you name the character, $signs. It was all there. And I told him, it doesn't matter, Mac or PC, this is code. This is as close to the metal as you can get when you start to use these symbols and characters for programming how your computer works. And when you start putting these symbols and characters in file names, the computer gets confused. And of course, we've heard clients make this very familiar reply, well, I never had a problem before.
Yeah, I love that.
I love that. Yeah. Sheesh.
1 hour of billable time later.
He had all the big hits, hashtags, slashes.
It was all there.
Everything you're exactly not supposed to have.
You have to tell them that, in this modern era, you're only supposed to name files with emojis at this point, right?
That's the truth.
But nothing from the symbols or flags section if you want to keep it, future proof. Right?
This just reminds me of clients being silly at times, but I had installed this Ubiquity network for this. It was kind of a sports complex area, and there was an area far down by the batting cages that wasn't going to be reached by any Ethernet. They didn't want us to run cables, so we set up a mesh device over there, and it worked great. And they were super happy. We left the job, and for a while, things were excellent. And then I got a message from the client with a screenshot of the Unify app showing Unify mesh disconnected at this time, Unify mesh disconnected at that time. She's like, what the heck's going on? It keeps showing disconnections. Okay, I'm thinking this through, and I'm looking at the times. They're pretty consistent, like around certain times of the evening. And, I seem to recall that there's electrical panels in that area of the place, and you tend to turn it off at night or when you leave the facility and there's no one there. Does that coincide with when you're leaving and turning off the electrical panel? oh, she's like, yeah, do you think that has something to do with it? I'm like, yeah, you're turning off the power. She's like, oh, that's great. She's like, perfect. And so we were great, but at first I was like, what the heck's going on here? But it was an easy problem to solve once she realized what she was doing.
That's awesome.
Jerry, that reminds me of what you just said. It used to be fun. It used to not be a problem. I have a great answer for that. You can just tell them either we can build a time machine and go back to when it was fine, or you can pay me to fix the...
I have a feeling if I had actually said that in that particular setting, I would have been shown the door a lot quicker.
It could have been worth it, though.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Just drop the mic and you're out,
It's funny. We all keep track of our show ideas in Evernote, and we all have like show topics. Joe, Jerry. I go back to my show topics, and sometimes I'm like, oh, this is really good, and I just only have time to jot down a word or two. I've got an entry in my show topic ideas. It's one word. It says gimlet. And I have no idea what it means.
That's a drink.
It could be a vodka gimlet. Who knows?
I've done that before too. You put a couple words in there. I'll remember this when we get to airtime, and I'm like, ooh, what did I mean by that?
We had another attorney that we did time and materials with, didn't want to be on a managed contract. He was one of those people where they go to the Apple store when the Mac Mini server was in fashion, and the Apple store would say, well, you could host your website, you could have your own email server, you could do file sharing, you could be an iChat server. And so he wanted to turn on all those services, so we got them all working for him, and he had been running his mail on this internal Mac Mini server. And for the most part, it kind of chugged along through different iterations of the Mac OS. And finally, he realized that, it was time to move to something that was a little bit more big boy. So we had kicked this around, and I had recommended to him to go to Rackspace. That's actually what I use for my business. We had some preliminary conversations, and we talked to his right-hand person in the office, and nothing happened. And a year goes by, and then finally the Mac Mini server mail program is really exhibiting problems. So he had to kind of scramble and put it together. And usually I like to have my clients take some initiative on their own to reach out to Rackspace. We'll register the lead, and then Rackspace will reach out to them, kind of get them set up and establish the account. And that way, it's under the business name with all the proper billing. And then you step in as their tech support representative. You get access to the account. So all these things were sort of in flux. And we get that panicked call in the middle of the day, and he's like, they told me to change the MX records. What does that mean? And I'm like, well, I kind of have a good relationship with him. I said, this isn't like going to CVS and buying a new toothbrush. I said, it's a little more non-trivial than that. Normally what we do is we establish a time with the client. We pick a day, usually a Friday afternoon at the end of the workday, and we'll make all the MX record changes, and then we'll configure all the workstations. Well, can you change the MX records? I said, well, let's schedule a time to do that. So I made that change for him, and we haven't heard from him since. He presses on.
Hopefully you see a check.
Yeah, he pays his bills, which is good.
Problem is if you email him the invoice, now he has a perfect alibi, right? He must have sent it to the old MX records or something.
Right. I'm sure you guys have those clients that are like that, where they just totally want to roll their own. They think, I've gone to law school, I've gone to med school, I can figure this out. I don't want to pay this guy X amount of dollars an hour to do stuff that I can do. And then they get stuck. And then you're in the middle of the workday. You have your day or your week all scheduled out. They want you to perform.
Or even the ones who do have MSP contracts with you and just decide to do it anyway. I got a few of those.
Right. Yeah. Rather than giving you the courtesy of like a, scheduled appointment and like picking your brain about it first and planning it out and everything. It's even more frustrating in those cases because it's like, this is what you're paying me for, but they figure, well, yeah, I'm still paying you. So now you've got to dance when everything goes wrong. So, and in your case, Jerry, with the guy, it's not an MSP kind of client. It's an hourly billing type of situation. That's equally frustrating, if not more so. But at least in theory, you have the out like, well, I'll schedule this for first thing next week or something. They know just as well as we do. They're still going to keep making the same mistakes. Very few times, in my experience, do they actually learn the benefit of engaging you during the process or having you just handle it or whatever. More often than not, I don't know about you, but I tend to just take care of it. They get themselves into trouble. They have a whole, fire drill scenario that totally could have been prevented. And yet, what are we supposed to do? Just tell them, too bad, we can't help you. I mean, we're in the business to help them. So more often than not, we're doing that. And then they, I think, learn that, well, yeah, they might scold me, but they're always going to be there to help. So they just keep doing it.
Yeah. Those jerks.
I wanted to mention this early on in the show because we've got a coupon for our listeners. So how often does that happen? So this all started, actually, I got an email from a friend, and she's down in Pennsylvania, and she's got a fairly new Mac Portable. Her power adapter is not fitting correctly into the electrical socket. Either the electrical socket is worn enough that the prongs are not holding the Apple power adapter in place. This is without the extension cord on it, of course. This is just with the little duckbill flip down. So the prongs are not really holding it because there's too much friction and wear in the socket itself. And then the weight of the Apple power supply just pulls the thing out of the socket, and it's just like dropping on the floor. She's really frustrated, and she's a dear friend. And she goes like, is there any way to fix this? That's form following function right there, honey. You've all seen this, right? Where the adapter keeps falling on the floor.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I didn't think there was a solution. So I'm out on the Google and I'm searching around.
Google.
And I discover this company called 101 Design, spelled TENONE design.com. And they've got this thing called a blockhead. And it's absolutely ingenious. It's the duckbill form that we all know and love, the little slider that fits on the Apple power adapter, but it's at a right angle. So the whole entire power adapter, instead of hanging in a vertical direction off of the plug, it hangs off the plug flush to the plug. There's not this weird weight thing where the plug has the tendency now to weep out of the plug because it's at a right angle now, at a 90-degree angle. And you could see this by going to their website, and it's ingenious. So I reached out to the company. I'm like, this is fantastic. I've never seen anything like this. I ordered one up for her, sent it out to her, and she's like loving her blockhead from 101 Design. And then I start to look further on this company's website, and they make another really great thing. So with the new USB-C Apple power adapters, there's no way to take the power cord and hold it in place around the power brick. In the older design, from the MagSafe backward, there were these little two, what would you call them, levers that flip out, and you could wrap your cord around that. This same company, 101 Design, has come out with this extension cord that plugs onto the duckbill again. It will give you more length for your Apple power adapter, and they'll also provide this way for you to cinch up the electrical cord so that it's not unwinding and unraveling itself as you store it away in your bag.
I think the most ingenious part of it all is the little hidden gem of it, which is the little flashlight at the end of it, basically. And when it gets close to power, it shines. So if you're doing this in the dark or something like that, you can easily find the power outlet. I thought that was incredible.
Right. That's just a little bonus that they have. And that's called the Stella, if I didn't mention it earlier. And as you scroll down, I mean, they've got these really, really clever, smart devices, and they're not all related to Apple Power. And they've just released something called Wi-Fi Porter, which is this very nicely designed disc. It's a rectangle with rounded corners, and it's got a Wi-Fi symbol. And you link that up to your Wi-Fi access point, and then guests who come into your office building or your home, all they need to do is to bring either their Android phone or their iPhone near this little self-contained, what would you call it, Sam?
Unit,
thank you. And you'll get a little pop-up screen asking you to join the network.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. When you had turned us on to that, as you usually do, Jerry, I was like, oh man, these things look really cool. And the blockhead, of course, reminds me of Charlie Brown, but that's how I remember the name of it. It's just such a great little design. And even my kids were like, what? That's wicked cool. Like, they were fascinated by it, even though it's just a plug that changes the orientation of the brick. It seems like almost it should have been that way. You know what I mean? And so it's a great idea that they came up with. And then I have the Stella as well, which I do dig.
Agreed. Ingenious products. And I didn't really do a good job talking about the new Wi-Fi porter. And I guess they just released this. And it's very reasonable. It's like $40 to get the Wi-Fi porter. You bring your device near it. And if it just doesn't pick it up automatically, you could just flip it over. And there's a QR code that your phone can scan. And it gives your client the ability to join your Wi-Fi network that way. So you could use this, again, in a home environment or a business environment. And it's ingenious.
Yeah, some really cool products. I totally agree. I'm very excited to try the Blockhead and or the Stella at some point here on the road, especially the Stella with that lighted part. I can't even imagine how that actually works. And I think, Jerry, the Blockhead, the way you described that is actually really interesting because I thought of this as a way for it to take up less space, like behind a desk or something, so it could plug in. And as you said, it'll be flush with the wall. But the other thing you pointed out is also really interesting too, which is that when the Apple power adapter sits, in the socket, basically all the weight is hanging down and the body of the power adapter is acting like a lever against the wall. So it has a tendency to pull itself out, because of that design. And like you said, this Blockhead just kind of hangs down without putting pressure opposing the wall. So it just has a tendency to stay in place better. So it's a really interesting thing to me also that a company can just survive based on little mini accessories to Apple products. But yeah, kudos to 10-1 Design for those products.
Yeah, big shout out to Dave over there, who was very nice and responsive. And he was excited to hear that we would mention his products on the show. So he's extended to all our listeners a 20% discount in the 10-1 Design store until the end of February. So all you need to do is when you check out, your coupon code is the word command with a capital C, and that'll knock 20% off the price right there. So we encourage you to just go over to the website, check this stuff out because it's ingenious and it's been a nice thing to have in my bag and also to show clients as well.
And speaking of vendors we like, I just want to give a shout out to everybody's favorite, Amazon, but possibly not for the reasons you might expect. I made a note here that I wanted to give Amazon developers some kudos for the Prime Video app on the iPhone. We usually use our iPhones to watch TV or movies on the road. So we've been using the Amazon Prime Video app, to watch a show called Catastrophe. Have you guys seen it?
Yes, several seasons. It's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun.
Nope.
I'd recommend it, Sam. Check it out. So we're watching this show. I've had experience with the Hulu app, the Netflix app, certainly YouTube and Apple's apps. None of the other apps do this, as far as I know. The behavior is that if you're watching a movie of any sort of video, and you tap in the middle of the screen, right now the screen is showing, say, just the video playing, right? You usually have to tap the screen to bring up the controls, and then you have to tap the control you want. What Amazon Prime Video does that I thought was really ingenious is when you tap in the middle of the screen where the pause button would be, it pauses. It knows that you're about to pause the video, and it knows exactly what you're trying to do. It seems to me that's a very obvious gesture. It's a safe assumption to assume the user, is about to pause the app if they're tapping right in the center. It's highly discoverable. You tap there, and the first time it happens, you're like, oh yeah, that's what I was about to do. Wow, that saved me a step. Really great. And it's easy to remember because then you think, oh, I'll just keep doing what I was doing. And now this time it taps and pauses the video just like I wanted. I'm curious, why are no other video streaming apps doing this? It seems like such an obvious feature. So kudos to Amazon for doing it with their Amazon Prime Video app. And I hope I see other developers start to do this in the future as well.
It's true how small of a thing that is, but whenever you're tapping, you're looking to do something else, maybe rewind or go to the menu to do something. Now you're losing part of the video because then you got to tap again to do something else. And so that instant pause seems so simple, but it's exactly what you're looking to do. Totally. Now, I don't use the Amazon Prime app, so I didn't know about that, but that's pretty cool. I'm starting to find actually there's some good content on Amazon that I haven't appreciated before, but I have so many on my backlog on Netflix that it's going to take me a while to catch up.
So a couple of shows ago, I had mentioned over the holidays, one of my relatives had shown me their Amazon Fire TV. And this also works with a Fire Stick as well, where he was going to a website, and the website's called troypoint.com, and it gives you the ability to scrape content off of the internet that may be paid content in other circumstances through other vendors. So if you do have an Amazon Fire TV, and we've been loving it, and it's actually transformed some of our viewing. We've been able to get some shows from the BBC that we weren't able to see before, and our kids have really been enjoying it. One of the things that Troy Point .com mentions to do is before you use any of these apps, and he tells you exactly what apps you would need to download to the Fire TV. Contrary to the Apple Store, on the Fire TV, it's like the Wild West. Anything you want to put on it is fair game. So if anybody's got a Fire TV or listening and thinking of picking up one, check out troypoint.com.
So switching gears a little bit to vendors who are on the not so nice list, especially right now, our very own first party Apple.
Are you putting them on the naughty list, Joe?
I'm not intending to put Apple on the naughty list per se, but they are going through some stuff right now. What I wanted to call attention to was this aspect we've talked about over the years with regards to Apple and their failure to inform us of documentation, things that are changing, things that are being adjusted. By the way, I'm totally open to being called out on this and pointed in the right direction if there is some way to stay more in the know. But I have a segment here that I'd like to introduce called Apple Should Have Told Us. Which is kind of a spin-off of I Should Have Known This, except it's one of these situations where it's kind of hard to know until you encounter it and until you kind of, bump into the issue. And so I'm going to ask you guys, I'll introduce this as actually an old friend of ours, the pop quiz segment. So we're sort of bridging three segments here in one.
Oh boy, I didn't study. I don't know about you, Jerry.
Well, that's the idea of a pop quiz.
Before you continue, I think it should be called Apple Should Have Told Me. It should be called Apple Should Have Told Me. They used to be corners. Now they're segments. So I'm a little confused.
Good point.
Yeah.
That's another good point. Fair points all. All right. So in this case, guys. Yeah, exactly. We got to reinvent ourselves a little bit. So let's say a client comes to you and they have an iPhone. They want to migrate to a new iPhone. And at some point in the past, they let's say they're not using iCloud backup. They're backing up to their Mac. And at some point in the past, they encrypted their backup. So they chose a password. They probably saved it in the keychain, one would hope. But they've since forgotten what the password is to encrypt their backup of their iPhone made with iTunes. There's no record of it in the keychain, let's say. They want to update their backup of their iPhone and switch to the new iPhone, but they don't want to use iCloud. What would you tell them?
This is the quiz?
This is the quiz, yeah. I would have flunked.
Is this the test? I mean, I've tried to retrieve a local iTunes backup that was encrypted, and I had no success. So I would assume that you'd have to find a way to delete the backup and create a new local backup.
You could delete the backup on the Mac, and you could connect the phone to iTunes. But I don't know if you guys have encountered this. What happens in that scenario is that iTunes will say, okay, what's the password for the backup? Like, in other words, it needs to know what the password was that was previously chosen before it will even make a brand new fresh backup, because that there is some kind of encryption key on the phone that's now being used for the backup. Without the password, the phone can't actually even back itself up. So even like, let's say you connected to a different Mac and you just run a backup for the first time, it would still want that password from the previously encrypted backup.
So your question is that this is achievable, but you didn't know the answer because Apple never told you.
Pretty much, yeah. I feel entitled to being informed of these changes by Apple, apparently.
Well, Sam is a Apple trainer, so he would know this answer. So I would say let's defer to Sam and have him tell us.
Jerry, I think you missed it, but I already failed.
We had a client come to us with this scenario. And of course, we generally say use iCloud backup. It's just better in general for lots of reasons. She didn't either want to buy the storage or wasn't able to do that or something.
She doesn't trust the cloud.
Yeah, doesn't trust the cloud, as she points up skeptically. And so she, was in the position of having us back it up to one of our computers, which had enough space to back it up. We said, okay, no problem. What's the password? And she, we tried helping her through lots of different guesses and couldn't figure it out. It was a little too late in the process. It was a little bit tricky for lots of reasons with this particular client. But in any case, I researched this and I found an answer that was pretty unexpected. And I found it through some third party that talked about backups, and they have a tool for backups and whatever else. And so this was kind of a roundabout solution. And it wasn't something that, that I found documented by Apple initially. And so I wasn't even quite sure whether to recommend it. Nonetheless, it was a surprise. So
before you tell us, Can I try one more guess?
Yeah, please.
So the way to do this is you call them on FaceTime, but you don't answer the phone call.
Exactly. And then you hope that you're overhearing Apple engineers talking about the issue in the background before they answer. This was actually an Apple knowledge base article dealing with encrypted backups in iTunes. So we can include the knowledge base article link in the show notes. Up until now, this article talks about what the situation is with encrypted backups. If you couldn't turn off iTunes backup encryption up until now, what you'd have to do is work around it. You'd have to use an iCloud backup, as I mentioned, or you'd have to basically erase the device and start over. But Apple's suggestion for devices with iOS 11 or newer, so this was something that was changed apparently in iOS 11, what you can do is go into Settings, General, Reset, and then you can go to Reset All Settings, and then you enter your iOS passcode. Now, what it does is it resets certain settings. I don't know exactly what it resets, but certain settings, but it does not affect your user data or your saved passwords and things. It will reset, as Apple says here, it will reset certain settings like display brightness, home screen layout, and wallpaper. And it also removes your encrypted backup password. So that's what we're after, of course, in this case, and that's exactly the effect that it has. So the situation here, though, is a little tricky because the last thing I want to do on a client device that's not backed up, that I'm intending to back up, is go into Settings, General, Reset, and do anything. Apparently, Reset All Settings is safe, as distinct from the other one where we're usually going in that screen, which is Erase All
content
and settings. Right. So Reset All Settings is different, and apparently that works. And so Apple updated this knowledge base article sometime after iOS 11 came out. And they still have a note here that says if you have a device with iOS 10 or earlier, you can't reset the password. In this case, try the following. And they say, if someone else set up your device, ask them for the password. Of course, that
I love that.
Here. I know. They're like, maybe you can get the password some other way. No, we've already been down that road.
I bet you could get it off a Dolly drive.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. They'll link to Dolly Drive. Use an iCloud backup instead of iTunes. If you don't have an iCloud backup, you can make one. And of course, and they give you instructions on how to do that. And then the other suggestion, very helpfully, is try using an older iTunes backup. So you can restore an older version of your backup.
That's something I wanted to do.
Yeah, right. I know. From
hold me back.
Years ago.
I can't wait to do that.
There was nothing in there about restarting?
No, yeah, I'm surprised they didn't say, you could try restarting and just buy us some time as we research the issue. Kind of interesting. And the general concept was, we should have known this. I wish I had known this. We didn't. And it's because it's, for 10 iOS versions, it's been the opposite until iOS 11 came out. And now they've added this feature. So the general question is, how do you go about updating your internal knowledge base? I mean, do you guys have the formula for this? I feel like I gain a lot of stuff just passively, like researching new issues for clients. Maybe there's a service that monitors Apple's knowledge base, bubble up any changed articles, or, does a diff on the text in the articles, or, is there some secret that I'm not privy to on how to stay up to date with these things?
Wow, that's getting really sophisticated. You know what I do when I discover something like this? And no joke, I put it into NV Alt. And then I enter it there, and it looks great, and then I forget about it.
Yeah, pretty much.
You know, I might put some keywords in the title of the entry. In this case, encrypted backups, iOS. First of all, Joe, that's a fantastic piece of information. That's worth the price of the show right there. That is really interesting and really invaluable. So you're saying that all this time, if a client has made an encrypted backup and they didn't know what the password was, there'd be no way to go forward by making a new encrypted backup. This device would essentially be locked unless you had to erase the entire device.
Well, correct. You'd have to erase the entire device and presumably reconfigure it. Maybe you manually take the client through syncing their data with different services so that at least once you reconfigure the device from scratch, you could, you'd get a lot of your data back. Hopefully nothing would be stored locally on devices anymore. Most things are syncing to the cloud, as Sam looks up. Ideally you wouldn't, you'd be in a position to just outright lose a lot of stuff, but you'd certainly have to go through this long process and reconfigure everything. So yeah, you'd have to erase the device completely up until now. Or of course make an iCloud backup, which again is not necessarily an option for everybody. Some people have slow internet and so on. It's not great, but at least that was the alternative.
Right.
It's great that they added this ability, though.
To answer your question about getting updates on the knowledge base, because you're an Apple certified consultant, don't you log into the Apple Consultants Network portal where you have full access to all the knowledge base articles and a posting of all the updates that have been issued recently? Don't
There's
you have
that entitlement that we all feel. Yes. Well, no. I wish.
Exactly.
I wish. I wish that there were it should just be public too, for that matter. I don't mind if this isn't something that's protected information. I mean, it's already publicly available in these articles. It would be nice. And in fact, in the back of my mind, I keep thinking, isn't there a place like an RSS feed or something that Apple has where they do show which articles have been updated? It's still up to us to actually read the info and then retain it and kind of make sense of what the important changes are. But I think if there's a way to see which articles have changed recently, at least then we can know where to focus our attention. But I mean, to answer your question, there is no such thing as a list of all the important information that you need to know for this next iOS version,
right,
at least with this level of detail.
Well, there's a business proposition to one of our listeners. I would certainly pay, all kidding aside, for a service like this where I could stay up to date with the most recent revisions to the knowledge base articles. There you go. Sam, in your free time, you could do this. You could program a website to do this.
Oh, yeah, sure, in my free time. I seem to remember someone having some kind of RSS feed to this stuff, and I'm trying to rack my brain thinking about it. But if it's not out there or I'm forgetting about it, that's definitely a big want for all of us.
Well, the thing is I probably am thinking of something that did exist at one point. It does not appear to exist anymore. So it's rare you find a link on Apple's site that is a dead link. It's much more common to see that on Dolly Drive's site, for example. But on
hits just keep on coming.
On Apple's site, they do have a support article, apple.com/support/RSS/intl/body.html. Of course, that will be in the show notes. They have a link to all their RSS information, complete with a blurry image at the top called RSS information. Under general support, they have a link to new and recently updated articles, and it links to rss.support.apple.com, which redirects to support.apple.com/RSS, which is not valid. So I think that they at some point did have this, and they just maybe don't maintain it anymore.
Jerry, I'm in my consultant's login. Can you direct me where all these articles for us are listed?
Am I just full of the snark tonight?
The snark.
That's why the people tune in.
Just full of the snark. Yeah, that would be a lovely thing to have, some sort of access. And you, like you say, Joe, why shouldn't this information be public? All the better, so that everybody could get access.
Right. I mean, and then I guess the business proposition is for someone to do kind of this meta-analysis on the whole thing and to bring the most important changes to the forefront. And let's say it's something that's offered to consultants, and they you can pay for it, or maybe I mean, it's something we do on the show just sort of randomly, but it could be an aspect of a service that somebody offers to other consultants out there. It's here's what you need to know to stay up to date. I mean, every day I'm going to various other websites and things just to know what's changing. I mean, if somebody brought the most important stuff to the forefront, I think that would be a valuable service to avoid having to check all these other sources and kind of just gather the info myself.
So you mentioned storing things in the keychain. You guys ever go out for these tech support calls and the client, to add extra security, they're not storing their email password in the keychain? So every time the app needs to retrieve email, the client has to retype in their password as the prompt comes up, and they won't check the box to store in the keychain because they're being,
right,
air quotes, extra secure.
I haven't seen someone do that in quite some time.
Man, I went through that the other day.
Wow.
Well, you could also tell them to just prefix their password with a dot, and then it hides hides it from the system.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's ultra secure.
Here's a great page for you, as long as we're browsing Apple's pages that are defunct. apple.com/support/home/index.html. It's got a link to iTunes 10 right there. I mean, I don't know why these pages are not deprecated and linked to whatever the modern version of this is.
Hey, if it's good enough for Dolly Drive, it's good enough for Apple. That's what I say.
It's true, yeah.
I'm keeping a tally of all these Dolly Drive references.
It's going to be on our new bingo drinking card.
So far, we're up to 42.
You joke now, Jerry, but what are you going to do when Mavericks is released? How are you going to prepare?
Now that tax season is approaching for all of us, I wanted to mention something that Tim Nyberg, one of our listeners from the Mac Guys, had mentioned to us that I subsequently passed along to my accountant right away. He had mentioned this 20% pass-through deduction for small business owners. And it looks to be a change in the tax year for 2018, where if you run a pass-through business, something like an LLC or S-Corp or something along those lines, you can qualify potentially for this 20% pass-through deduction. So I'm going to include the link in the show notes. Obviously, you can go there and check it out with your accountant or whoever does your taxes, if it's your brother-in-law or something like that, and make sure that take a look at it at least to see if you qualify, because it could be a nice chunk of change if we're looking at 20%. I sent it on to my accountants and they said very much so you guys will qualify for this. So I'm looking forward to saving some bucks. So thanks to Tim Nyberg for that tip.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good one, Sam. I think it's called the Section 199A deduction. I looked at it also, I think maybe when Tim brought it up. The thing that I encountered was that it says it does not apply to, quote, specified service businesses or trade. And then they go on to list consulting. And then they say, or, quote, any field where the principal asset is the skill or reputation of one of its employees. So it kind of sounds like our businesses. This is definitely not tax advice, but you ask a person who you can get tax advice from. So I totally agree with you to talk to your accountant about this and see what they can do.
So far, they said that this is something that you can qualify for, but we haven't finalized our taxes yet. So who knows if he'll come back to me, but that's what they've told me so far. But you're just raining on my parade, Joe. So thank you.
I thought you told me Nana does your taxes.
For me or for Joe?
For you, Sam.
I thought Nana does all our taxes.
You know, Nana loves the Stella Artois beer. You know about that, right?
Oh, yeah. Is this what you meant by gimlet? I'm sorry. Are you sure that she doesn't like the gimlet? Maybe that was the note from earlier.
Could be. There's a new Stella Artois commercial, and that's a beer, of course. And it's got Carrie Bradshaw, which, of course, is Sarah Jessica Parker, and Jeff Bridges, who appears as the dude. And it's the most amazing commercial. It's kind of weird, but we'll put that in the show notes. It's really funny. And that actually reminds me, I have a client. He's a retired advertising guy. So he used to work in New York and still works in Cork. You know the type. And he calls himself the dude. He recently texted me that he needed some tech support because something wasn't working. And my response was, Donnie, you're out of your element. So let's hope that he got it. I went over there and he claimed that he got the reference, but that made me laugh.
That's a new one to have to drive over in person to explain a joke. That's really, wow.
That's putting the effort in.
Yeah, really. Well done.
Command, control, power. Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.
Half a century combined.